Wonderful. So tonight we have a grammar and punctuation section, and then we have a long reading passage, and then we have vocabulary, including etymology. So this is an interesting grammar section, kind of a neat little story. Lily's mission, Dyer's woad. Lily barks as she turns in a circle. Then she sits down, patiently waiting for her handler, conservationist Amy Hurt. The yellow Labrador retriever's actions tell her that Lily has detected Dyer's woad, the invasive weed the two are searching for, period. It looks to me like the wildflower speckled hillside of Mount Sentinel in Montana. We'll see if this word fits, but it probably doesn't because this is all one sentence. So let's go back here. Labrador retriever's actions tell her that Lily has detected Dyer's woad, comma, the invasive weed the two are searching, whatever, blank, blank, blank. So is the comma here appropriate? Should we do no change? Or should we say Dyer's woad, the plant is, without any punctuation? Or Dyer's woad, comma, it's the invasive weed? Or Dyer's woad, it's the invasive weed? So essentially what we're doing here is we're explaining what Dyer's woad is. So think of everything after it as basically a description of this, of Dyer's woad. So a comma is the appropriate thing. You don't want to have no punctuation. You don't need another pronoun because what comes after it is referring directly back to Dyer's woad, the noun. So adding its is not going to help. And then over here, you don't need the plant is, and you don't have any comma here. So all three of these are incorrect. So no change is the right answer. Now, over here, the yellow Labrador retriever's actions tell her that Lily has detected Dyer's woad, the invasive weed the two are searching for, blank, the wildflower speckled hillside of Mount Sentinel in Montana. So searching blank, okay? So let's look what choices we have. They're not searching for the wildflower speckled hillside. They're searching for Dyer's woad. So this is very confusing the way it is right here. It makes it look like they're searching for the hillside. Okay, so this can't be right. Okay, it makes no sense. It's illogical. So it has to be something else. They are searching for on the wildflower speckled hillside of Mount Sentinel. Now that makes sense. Okay, let's try the next one. Searching on at the wildflower speckled hillside. No, you don't search on something, you search for something, and you're not at a hillside, you're on a hillside. So both of these are wrong as prepositions. So the last one is two are searching on the wildflower. No, you need the word for because searching for the Dyer's woad. Okay, so if you just have the word on, it doesn't make any sense. So the only correct answer to this is B. They're searching, okay, let's just read through it. The invasive weed the two are searching for on the wildflower speckled hillside of Mount Sentinel in Montana, period. So again, B is the right answer. So let's move on. Lily's actions also triggers the GPS unit attached to her harness to record the dog's precise location. That's pretty cool, right? So they know where the dog is when it's circling. Now, actions is plural. Okay, everything here is present tense, right? So you do not want to have past tense. Has triggered is wrong. Okay, but remember, if you have a plural subject, okay, you need a plural verb. So actions trigger, not triggers. So trigger is correct, right? Has triggered is past tense. That's incorrect. Lily's actions also is important? No. It might say are important, but it's a complete extra words that don't add anything to the meaning. The only right answer here is trigger. Lily's actions also trigger the GPS unit attached to her harness to record the dog's precise location. So the dog sniffs out the dyer's woad, finds a tiny little plant that no one can see. It's buried in the grass, but the dog's nose tells it where it is. Then she runs in a circle and she tells her handler, Dr. Hurt, where the dyer's woad is located. And then also the GPS records it. Once Hurt catches up to Lily, the retriever gets ready for what's next. Okay. So let's see what this question is. Which choice provides the best transition from this sentence to the following sentence? Once Hurt catches up to Lily, the retriever wags her tail, as she always does when Hurt approaches. Hurt can then find the 1-inch tall plant. Okay. Once Hurt catches up to Lily, the retriever is no longer permitted to bark incessantly. Hurt can then find the 1-inch tall plant. Or choice D. Once Hurt catches up to Lily, the retriever points her nose directly at the woad, period. Hurt can then find the 1-inch tall plant. So the only right answer here is D, because it explains why Hurt can find the plant. Hurt can find the plant because Lily's pointing at it with her nose. So the logical progression makes sense for this answer and not for the others, which are too vague and truly unrelated. So D is the right answer, okay? Hurt can then find the 1-inch tall plant, pulling it up as she watches, anticipating her reward. Now, who's she? Is it Hurt or is it Lily? Do we know? Is this too vague? Does it not tell us what's really going on? Could be Hurt watching, could be Lily watching. So let's see what choices we have. Pulling it up as he or she watches. It's two girls. So why would he be in there? It's Lily and Amy. So I mean, if we still believe in pronouns, I don't know anymore. But if we still believe in pronouns, he and she, then this doesn't make any sense. So let's see what else. Pulling it up as Lily watches. Yeah. Because the next phrase is, anticipating her reward. Who's anticipating the reward? Not her, Lily. So this comma and this phrase afterwards is referring to Lily. And now if we clarify this, we know it's Lily watching while Hurt pulls the plant up. So Lily watches is great. Pulling it up as you watch, no, you're not even there, right? You're just the reader. So you can't possibly be there watching. So that's definitely wrong. So the only thing that really clarifies the meaning and makes sense with the extra phrase is Lily watches, okay? Pulling it up as Lily watches, anticipating her reward. In a few weeks, the team will return to the spot to confirm that the weed has not resprouted. And the reason they can go back is because they have the GPS coordinates, which makes perfect sense. Lily is one of several dogs on the crew of Working Dogs for Conservation. So this is the name of an organization. On the crew of Working Dogs for Conservation, a nonprofit organization based in Three Forks, Montana. All of that is correct. The group trains dogs and works with humans on a variety of conservation-related initiatives. So do they train dogs and then as a separate action, they work with humans? Or is Working Dogs for Conservation training dogs to work with humans? I think they're training dogs to work with humans. This makes it sound like they're training dogs and also they work with humans like they're separate functions, and they're not. So what we need to do is find something that indicates that they're training the dogs to work with humans. So let's look at 51. The group trains dogs to work with humans. Yeah, that sounds good. The group trains dogs and does work with humans. No, again, same problem. It indicates that the group is working and they're not training the dogs to work. The group trains dogs while working with humans. Again, same problem. They're training dogs to work with humans. That's what they're doing. That's their whole function, is to train dogs. So the only right answer is B, training dogs to work with humans. Okay, 52. Let us move on a variety of conservation-related initiatives, period. In 2010, the organization from the state joined one of Montana's longest-running projects to eradicate Dyer's woad. The organization from the state joined one of Montana's longest-running projects. Okay, what are we going to do with this? Let's see. Which placement of the underlined portion puts the clearest emphasis on the organization's goal to remove Dyer's woad specifically from Montana? Okay. So where it is now, the organization from the state joined one of Montana's longest running projects to eradicate Dyer's woad. After the word joined, the organization joined from the state, one of Montana's. After the word projects, the organization from the state, the organization joined one of Montana's longest running projects from the state to eradicate Dyer's woad, or after the word woad. So if you put it after the word woad and before the period, it reads like this. In 2010, the organization joined one of Montana's longest running projects to eradicate Dyer's woad from the state. So this is what you're trying to do. And you're trying to emphasize that you're removing Dyer's woad from Montana. So this phrase should go after Dyer's woad, to eradicate Dyer's woad from the state. Okay, we already know it's Montana. We know it's Montana, but we want to get rid of all the Dyer's woad in the state. So 52 should be J, after the word woad and before the period. Okay, good. Remember, guys, we're going for meaning too, right? Not just correct punctuation, but you've got, this thing has to make sense. Okay. Since the 1950s, the hardy, fast-growing weed has choked out native plants and overrun wildlife habitats in several Montana counties. So you're using verbs like choked out and overrun. So that's pretty dramatic, right? That indicates a lot of damage that these weeds are doing, these invasive weeds are doing. So in the preceding sentence, the writer is considering revising the phrase choked out to the word harmed and the word overrun to the word affected. Should the writer make these revisions? So what do you guys think? Should we change choked out to harmed and change overrun to affected? Any volunteers?
No.
I think you're right. The answer is no. And the reason is because we're trying to emphasize the damage here. So this expression choked out really emphasizes damage. So does overrun. These words that we substitute don't really emphasize enough the damage. So no is correct. No, because the revision suggests that the work of the group Lily belongs to has been largely ineffective. Doesn't say that anywhere. No, because the revisions downplay how destructive Dyer's woad has been. Yeah. We don't want to soften the statement. The statement is hard the way it is, and it should be hard because this Dyer's woad is bad news. So we don't want to change it to a softer description. Okay. So I totally agree with you. And the right answer there is D. Specially trained dogs can dig out the tiny young specimens of Dyer's woad that humans often miss. Okay. Dig out is what we're being asked to question here. Specially trained dogs can dig out. Specially trained dogs can sniff out, can uncover, can pull up. Well, we know the handler pulls it up. It's not really covered, right? It's just in the grass that you can't see it easily. How do dogs find it? With their nose. They sniff it out. So they're not digging yet because she comes and digs. All the dog does is turn in circles and sit down. She pulls it out. So basically, the right answer here is sniff out because they use their nose. Okay? The tiny young specimens of Dyer's woad that humans often miss. Now, okay, let's look over here. We're going to look at this phrase, specimens of Dyer's woad, comma. Should we put a comma here? Is a comma needed? No. You should not put a comma there. Specimens, comma, of Dyer's Woad. Do you need a comma there? Absolutely not. So that one's wrong. You don't want to place commas where they don't belong. Specimens of Dyer's Woad, comma. That looks the same as the other one. Anyway, there's a comma there. Does it belong there? No, it doesn't. So you don't need any punctuation. So this sentence is perfectly fine without any commas. So sniff out the tiny young specimens of Dyer's Woad that humans often miss, period. So you leave it the same. 55 is no change. 56, with the dog's help, comma, conservationists are better able to locate and remove woad, semicolon, before it matures and reproduces, comma, releasing thousands of seeds. So the semicolon is always wrong if you don't have a complete sentence before and after. There is a complete sentence before, right? With the dog's help, conservationists are better able to locate and remove woad. That's a complete sentence. But this is not. Before it matures and reproduces, releasing thousands of seeds, you don't have a complete sentence there. It's a sentence fragment. So you can't have a semicolon. So we know that's wrong. Okay. So let's see what choices we have. Specimens of Dyer's Woad, comma, before it matures, comma, and reproduces, releasing thousands of seeds. So that's G, right? And the question is, do you think that's correct? Should you separate out that whole phrase, before it matures? Okay. Let's see if you need to do this. Remove woad before it, comma, matures. Absolutely not. That comma is totally inappropriate. Okay, let's look at J. Let's see. To locate and remove woad before it matures and reproduces, releasing thousands of seeds. Yeah, you don't need all these commas. All you need, okay, is a comma that separates releasing thousands of seeds, okay? So what we want to do here is say, with the dog's help, conservationists are better able to locate and remove woad before it matures and reproduces, comma, releasing thousands of seeds. So here's your ing phrase that needs to be separated by a comma, but this part doesn't need any punctuation, okay? Before it matures and reproduces. So these verbs are in parallel, and they're perfectly fine. No commas required. So what you want is you want J. J is the right answer. You do need this comma to separate the ing phrase, okay? Releasing thousands of seeds. This comma is totally appropriate, but all of the punctuation here is unnecessary, okay? So 56 is J. Hurt thanks Lily by tossing a tennis ball for her to chase, semicolon. Lily's longtime favorite reward for identifying the scent of Dyer's Woad. So semicolons are used to separate complete sentences that are related, but this is not a complete sentence. So we know a semicolon is wrong, okay? So now we have to look for other choices. To chase, semicolon, which is, nope, that's still not a complete sentence. To chase, comma, Lily's longtime favorite reward for identifying the scent of Dyer's Woad. Yeah, there you go. The comma basically separates tennis ball for her to chase, comma. This is her longtime favorite word for identifying the set. So the comma makes perfect sense. The period makes no sense because what comes after it is not a complete sentence. So you don't want a semicolon because there's no complete sentence. You don't want a period. The only thing you want is a comma. So the right answer to 57 is C. Okay, let's move on. A former shelter dog now living with one of her handlers, comma, Lily was assigned to the Dyer's Woad project for her ability, much like a police dog's, to ignore all other scents while she is working. Or let's just take this much like a police dog's out and just read the sentence. Lily was assigned to the Dyer's Woad project for her ability to ignore all other scents while she is working. It's a perfectly good sentence. So this stuff right here, much like a police dog's, should be cordoned off with commas before and after. Let's see, or if you're not going to use a comma, you got to use another punctuation, but it's got to be symmetrical. It's got to be matching on either side. So you can use a dash, okay? For her ability, dash, much like a police dog's, dash. So the only right answer here is G, because the right thing to do here is to separate out this parenthetical phrase. You could even put this in parentheses. You could put a dash before and after. You could even put a comma before and after. But in this particular passage, the only thing that makes sense is a dash before and after this phrase, much like a police dog's, because this can be removed and it's a perfectly good sentence. Okay? After Lily returns with her ball, comma, she and Hurt continue on their search, period. Lily's nose, comma, like the noses of a small number of other conservation dogs, comma, has helped humans. Okay, so like the noses of, Lily's nose, like the noses of, Lily's nose, like them belonging to, okay, them belonging sounds like you're a hillbilly, okay? It should be those belonging, so them is wrong. That belonging, no, it should be those. Like those noses, that like those belonging, because it's plural, right? So them and that are both wrong. And guess what? Like the nose of a small number of other dogs, they don't have a single nose, right? Lily's nose, like the noses of a small number of other dogs, has helped humans find a new way to strengthen their bonds with dogs. Okay, so you got a bunch of different dogs, so you got to have a bunch of different noses. So guess what? This is 59 as is correct. Okay, otherwise you'd have a bunch of other dogs with a single nose. And obviously each dog has its own nose. So there are multiple noses. So the right answer is to leave it alone, okay? Has helped humans find a new way to strengthen their bonds with dogs, okay? This is kind of a very, very inappropriately generic sentence. We're talking about finding Dyer's woad, not about strengthening bonds between humans and dogs. This concluding phrase is out of place. It doesn't follow from the rest of the essay. We need something that talks about getting rid of Dyer's woad, right, as a concluding sentence. So let's see, we got, has helped humans locate Dyer's woad, find fungi. It doesn't say anything about fungi. Forget about this. Has helped humans almost completely weed out Dyer's woad in several areas of Montana. That makes sense. Focused on Dyer's woad, focused on Montana. Let's look at the last choice. Has helped humans make strides with an initiative that has been popular. Totally vague, completely non-specific, and incorrect. So the only right answer is H. Okay, has helped humans almost completely weed out Dyer's woad in several areas of Montana. Okay, so H is the correct answer. Good guys, very good. This stuff is very worthwhile to go through, because if you start learning the patterns of what you need to look for and why, it'll get very easy and you'll be able to move through the test fairly quickly. You'll be able to eliminate things that are wrong very quickly. Okay. Natural science, this passage is adapted from Lost Discoveries, the Ancient Roots of Modern Science, from the Babylonians to the Maya by Dick Terezi. Antoine Laurent Lavoisier, 1743 to 1794, was a financier, established a system of weights and measures that led to the metric system, and lived through the early turmoil of the French Revolution, and was a pioneer in scientific agriculture. So he's quite a man. Developed a system of weights and measures that led to the metric system. He was a financier, so he knew economics. He also was a pioneer in scientific agriculture, and he lived during the turmoil of the French Revolution. He has been called the father of modern chemistry, and in the course of his busy life, he brought Europe out of the dark ages of that science. So he was the first true scientific chemist, is what this person is saying. One of Lavoisier's early contributions resulted from his boiling water for long periods of time. In 18th century Europe, many scientists believed in transmutation, one element becoming another element. They thought, for instance, that water could be transmuted into earth, among other things. Chief among the evidence for this was water boiling in a pot. Solid residue forms on the inside surface. Scientists proclaimed this to be water turning into a new element. Robert Boyle, the great 17th century British chemist and physicist who flourished 100 years before Lavoisier, believed in transmutation. Having watched plants grow by soaking up water, he concluded, as many had before him, that the water can be transformed into leaves, flowers, and berries. In the words of chemist Harold Goldwhite of California State University, Los Angeles, Boyle was an active alchemist. Alchemy used to be the process of turning base metals into gold. But there was also this general belief that you could turn one element into another. So this idea that the plant soaks up water and the water becomes the berries was believed by many scientists. And that boiling water, if you saw the white powder at the bottom of the pot, that was water that had turned into a different element. A lot of them believed it, but Lavoisier questioned it, and he developed an experiment to test it. Lavoisier noticed that weight was the key and that measurement was critical. He poured distilled water, meaning totally clear water with nothing in it, into a special tea kettle called a pelican, an enclosed pot with a spherical cap, which caught the water vapor and returned it to the base of the pot via two handle-like tubes. He boiled the water for 101 days and found substantial residue at the bottom. He weighed the water, the residue, and the pelican. The water weighed exactly the same. The pelican weighed slightly less, an amount equal to the weight of the residue. Thus, the residue was not a transmutation from the water, but part of the pot, dissolved glass, silica, and other matter. So through accurate, very precise measurement, he showed that the residue at the bottom of the pot did not come from the water, that it actually came from the pot. Okay, disproving the idea that water transmutates into powder. As scientists continued to believe that water was a basic element, Lavoisier performed another crucial experiment. He invented a device with two nozzles and squirted different gases from one into the other. He combined them to see what they made. One day, he mixed oxygen with hydrogen, expecting to get acid. He got water. He percolated the water through a gun barrel, meaning he let it go through this hot gun barrel with these hot iron rings, splitting the water back into hydrogen and oxygen and confirming that water was not an element, it was a compound. It was a combination of two elements, hydrogen and oxygen. Lavoisier measured everything, and on each occasion that he performed this experiment, he got the same numbers. Water always yielded oxygen and hydrogen in a weight proportion of 8:1. What Lavoisier saw was that nature paid strict attention to weight and proportion. Ounces or pounds of matter did not disappear or appear at random. The same ratios of gases always yielded the same compounds. Nature was predictable and therefore malleable. So if you understand the rules of nature, you get two hydrogens with an oxygen every time, right? H2O to make water. If you understand the rules, then you might be able to manipulate compounds. Ancient Chinese alchemy, circa 300 to 200 BC, remember this is almost 2,000 years earlier, was built around the concept of two opposing principles. These could be, for example, active and passive, male and female, or sun and moon. The alchemists saw nature as having a circular balance. Substances could be transformed from one principle to another and then rendered back to their original state. This concept of circular progression of elements. A prime example is cinnabar, known commonly today as mercuric sulfide, a heavy red mineral that is the principal ore of mercury. Using fire, these early alchemists decomposed cinnabar into mercury and sulfur dioxide. Then they found that mercury would combine with sulfur to form a black substance called metacinnabar, which then can be sublimed into its original state, the bright red cinnabar, when once more heated, according to science historian Wang Kuike. Both mercury's liquid quality and the cyclic transformation from cinnabar to mercury and back again gave it magical qualities. Kuike called mercury Huangdan, a cyclical transformed regenerative elixir associated with longevity. Yeah, this is where they go off the rails. They think that mercury is going to prolong your life when actually it's a heavy metal poison. These ancient practitioners became familiar with the concept that substances could be transformed and then come full circle to their original state. They developed exact proportions of the amounts of mercury and sulfur, as well as recipes for the exact length and intensity of the heating required. Now that's pretty sophisticated. Most important, according to Kuike, these operations could be performed without the slightest loss of the total weight. So the conservation of weight concept, the conservation of mass, the proportions would remain the same, the proportions of ingredients to create the final product, and vice versa when you went one way or the other way. It would appear that the ancient Chinese alchemists were empirically familiar with the conservation of mass 1,500 years before Lavoisier's experiment. He and his alchemist precursors discovered that the weight of the products in a chemical reaction equal the weight of the reactants. Very, very important. And this is one of the things that disprove transmutation, right? So let us answer the questions. It's kind of a really important guy, Lavoisier, somebody I would remember. Just remember he developed the metric system and he disproved transmutation of elements. In the sixth paragraph, lines 55 through 61, the focus of the passage shifts from a discussion of, let's see, 55 through 61, right here, ancient Chinese alchemy. So we're starting to talk about ancient Chinese alchemy and about the opposing principles and coming full circle, okay? Before we were talking about Lavoisier's experiments. So let's see what a good answer is to this. It shifts from a discussion of Lavoisier's system of weights and measures to a description of ancient Chinese measurement systems. We don't really talk about measurement systems. Let's try something else. It shifts from a discussion of the findings of European alchemists to an explanation of how ancient Chinese alchemy undermined. Not at all. We're talking about Lavoisier's experiments in the first part. It shifts from a discussion of some of Lavoisier's most important scientific findings to a discussion of similar earlier findings in China. That could be, definitely could be it. It shifts from a discussion of Boyle's influence on Lavoisier's work. No, it doesn't say that in the passage. Lavoisier disproved Boyle. Okay. So everything is wrong except C. Okay. It's just from a discussion of some of Lavoisier's most important scientific findings to a discussion of similar earlier findings using the mercury disulfide in China. Excellent. 32. One of the main purposes of the passage is to provide a historical overview of how alchemy evolved, highlight scientific experiments that prove that mass is always conserved, demonstrate how ancient Chinese science experiments inform studies in science today, describe the importance of a few chemical elements in famous historical experiments. So basically, the study discusses various experiments, those by the Chinese alchemists and those by Lavoisier, that prove that mass is always conserved. Okay, and even the last paragraph mentions the conservation of mass. So the right answer to 32 is G. Okay, 33. The passage suggests that regarding the method Lavoisier used to conduct his experiments, what was most critical was using the most accessible chemical elements. It doesn't say that. Inventing the equipment doesn't say that. Consulting the research of his contemporaries doesn't say that. Ensuring precise measurements of weight. D is critical. Otherwise, you cannot come up with the idea of calculation of mass. So 33 is D. 34. Based on the passage, Lavoisier's hydrogen and oxygen experiment and the ancient Chinese cinnabar experiment have in common the fact that they both disprove earlier scientific theories about weight and proportion, involve minerals associated with longevity. That's true of the Chinese, but not the other one. Transform substances to different forms and then back to their original state. And that's correct, right? Because remember, Lavoisier was able to put hydrogen and oxygen together as gases, create water, and then put water through a hot gun barrel with iron rings, and then create oxygen and hydrogen again. And we know that the Chinese did the same thing with cinnabar. They broke it into its constituent parts and they reconstructed it from those parts. So H is a very good answer. Required special designed equipment. It doesn't say that at all about the Chinese. So H is the correct answer to 34. Okay, 35. The main purpose of the first paragraph is to introduce Lavoisier. Remember, they give you his resume. He was a financier. He developed a system of weights and measurement that led to the metric system. He brought chemistry out of the Dark Ages, and he lived through the French Revolution. That last one is not really an accomplishment. Okay, so the main purpose is to introduce Lavoisier by noting his varied accomplishments and historical importance, describing his contributions to science and the French Revolution. Well, he didn't contribute to the French Revolution, he just lived through it. Subtly questioning his title as the father of modern chemistry. No, there's no cynicism there, there's no negativity. Suggesting that his pioneering work in scientific agriculture brought Europe out of the dark. It doesn't really even mention agriculture in the passage. Basically, it talks about him taking chemistry out of the Dark Ages. He brought Europe out of the Dark Ages, right? Modern chemistry. He has been called the father of modern chemistry. He brought Europe out of the Dark Ages of that science. So he didn't bring them out of the Dark Ages of agriculture. He brought them out of the Dark Ages of chemistry. So that answer is definitely wrong. So what do we got left? D is wrong. C is wrong. He didn't contribute to the French Revolution. B is wrong. The only good answer is A, noting his varied accomplishments and historical importance. Okay? So it's just a general introductory paragraph, and it's very appropriate. So 35 is A. So let's do 36. The main idea of the second paragraph, 8 through 24, is what? Well, if we look at the second paragraph, we see early contributions, boiling water, evidence that water did not turn into the residue. And then it talks about how, okay, basically, this talks about how people believed in transmutation, including Boyle, who's a very famous physicist, okay? So it kind of sets the stage, right, for what was believed before in regard to transmutation. So let's see what our choices are. The main idea of the second paragraph is, in the 18th century, Boyle and Lavoisier were leading scientists who made significant contributions. No, Boyle was in the 17th century, right? He's 100 years earlier. Lavoisier hypothesized that boiled water would transmute into a new element. No, he did not do that. Boyle developed the theory of transmutation after watching plants soak up water and grow leaves, flowers, and berries. Did he develop the theory, or did he think that that showed the theory? The theory preceded Boyle. He signed on to it. J, transmutation was a long-held theory that, among other things, explained why residue remained in a pot after boiling. And that is the right answer. Boyle did not introduce the concept of transmutation. He adhered to it, but he didn't introduce it. So 36, the right answer is J. 37, it can logically be concluded that Lavoisier's hydrogen and oxygen experiment was crucial, line 38, mainly because it was the first to mix naturally occurring elements, doesn't say that, refuted an established scientific belief. That could definitely be a good answer. Introduced new methods of measurement, not in that experiment. Led to the invention of a device used in other experiments, doesn't say that. Okay, so essentially, the only right answer here is B. Refuted an established scientific belief. Okay. So, you know, he's coming up here with the idea that transmutation doesn't exist. And also the idea that water is not an element. It's a compound. So when he did his hydrogen oxygen experiment, he showed that hydrogen and oxygen together made up water. So it couldn't be an element, couldn't be elemental, had to be a compound. So he refuted that idea that water was an element. So 37B is the right answer. As it is used in line 14, the word forms most nearly means, okay, I think this is about the residue. Let's look at line 14. Solid residue forms on the inside surface of the pot. So accumulates, gathers, appears. Let's see what word we want to use. Constitutes, models, arranges, accumulates. There it is, accumulates. So J is the right answer. So 38 is J. 39, according to the passage, when Lavoisier first mixed oxygen with hydrogen, he expected to get water, acid, vapor, or sulfur. Acid. Remember, he was surprised. It says here, one day he mixed it expecting to get acid. You can find it right in the text. So just run back and look at the text and you got your answer. Acid, B. The example of the sun and moon, opposites, remember, balance, in the passage helps illustrate the point that Chinese alchemists focused on the concept of two opposing principles. Yes, two opposing principles, the sun and the moon, right? Were some of the earliest scientific practitioners, often transformed substances from one principle to another, believed nature was predictable and malleable. The only thing that comes out in the passage is the sun and the moon representing opposing principles. And you can see that active, passive, male, female, sun, moon, opposing principles. So that is the correct answer to 40, F. Good job, guys. Well, it's a nice piece of history. Don't forget about Antoine Lavoisier, who basically helped develop the metric system, who disproved transmutation and who showed that water was not an element. Quite a brilliant man. I did a lot of other things too. Okay, we're gonna stop sharing and we're gonna move on to our vocabulary, which is always fun. Here we go. And of course, our first word, which we've discussed in some detail, is transmutation. And who has a definition for me of transmutation?
It's like a change in form.
Yeah, it's a changing one element into another. In the scientific literature, it's kind of another name for alchemy. I don't know if you guys know this, but alchemy was a huge thing before modern chemistry. Everybody wanted to take base metals like lead and turn it into gold. Every king hired alchemists to make gold for them. And they tried all kinds of stuff to do it, heating it, adding things to it, burying it underwater. They were going to turn lead into gold, but it never worked because lead is an element, right? So is gold. They're different. And they can't be transmutated. Okay. But then, along came Lavoisier, and he was basically saying there is no such thing as transmutation. So alchemy kind of fell by the wayside, but for hundreds of years, it was a big deal. Okay, percolate. What does percolate mean? It does not mean boil. Because I know you have a percolator at home for your coffee, so people always say, oh, percolation is boiling. No, it's not. It means something very different. So tell me what percolate means.
Filtering.
Yeah, it filters gradually through a porous material. It'll spread through the material, percolate through. So rainwater will percolate down through the ground. Okay. Now, when you run a coffee percolator, the water does boil up and it forms steam on the top and then it condenses and it falls into the filter, which is full of coffee grounds. And then the water percolates down through the coffee and winds up back down at the bottom of the pot. And this process goes on and on and on, eventually extracting almost all of the active coffee residue out of the grinds. Okay, but a percolator is percolating. It isn't just boiling. And there is a difference. Okay, so don't forget that. Now let's talk about malleable. What is it when something is malleable? A
It can
person.
be bent.
Say it again, hon.
It can be bent.
Yeah, that's the original definition because it referred to metal, usually. Capable of being shaped or pulled or extended or manipulated to change its shape. But also, you can refer to a person as being malleable, as opposed to someone who's rigid, who won't change their mind. A malleable person can be influenced, can be convinced of something. And whereas somebody who's very rigid, very brittle, cannot be changed, cannot be convinced of anything. So you want to oppose malleable with something like rigid or brittle. And also talks about people, not just metals. Good. Sublime. What is when something is sublime?
Awe-inspiring.
Yes. And the thing about it is people use this word all the time. And they're very, a lot of them are very stuck up. It's kind of a pretentious word. Like if I'm at dinner and so I have the appetizer, I have the caviar, and I turn to my dinner mates and I say, "Oh, this caviar was simply sublime." It's pretentious as hell, and so people don't really use it that much. I mean, you might want to say something like, "I went to this wonderful play, and the ending was just sublime." It's like a real extreme form of praise. It's what we call a superlative. You know, it's like I don't know, grand, exalted, lofty, elevated, sublime. But be careful when you use it because people will think you're stuck up. Now, what's the the chemistry definition, scientific definition of sublimation? When an element sublimes, it goes from what to what? Hello.
Is it from solid to gas?
That's correct. So sublimation would be dry ice that turns into carbon dioxide gas. You with me? Right? Dry ice doesn't become liquid carbon dioxide. It just sublimes into a gas. And they use it a lot for special effects on stage. Creates like a mist on the stage. And that's because it's freaking cold when it rises and the water condenses around it. But the gas itself is not visible. So don't forget sublimation in terms of chemistry or physics. Okay, elixir, a magic elixir. What's an elixir?
A magic potion.
Yeah. It's a medicinal concoction or a magic potion. And a lot of times we use the word elixir, meaning it is something that will prolong our life. It's like, you drink it and you live forever type thing. That's the way it used to be. But now you kind of use it just to mean a medicinal. Oh, take this elixir, it'll help your cough. But it used to have a much more profound meaning. It was going to prolong your life. Elixir of the gods. Okay, bereft. To be bereft of something means what?
Deprived.
Yeah, to lacking something, needing something. He was bereft of shelter. He slept on the street. He was bereft of medical care. He was dying of a very simple disease. So it means you're lacking something. The other way you can use bereft is bereavement, and that usually refers to the death of a loved one. She was bereft when her husband died. Okay, so you can use it in that way too. Okay, blandishment. What are blandishments?
Flattery.
Yeah, you use blandishments to get somebody to do what you want them to do, and either you flatter them or you give them gifts. You do something to persuade them. So you could use a term like the lobbyists used blandishments on the senator to get him to vote a certain way. And that's true. Lobbyists do that. They give perks, all kinds of special things to senators to buy their vote. Of course, it's unethical to sell your vote, right? Take the senator out to dinner, buy him a nice Rolex watch for $20,000. Suddenly you've got his vote. Those are blandishments. Okay, what is it to bilk something?
You cheat for money.
Yeah. Well, you bilk someone out of their money. It's trickery or threats to take people's money. You rob them basically, but mostly when you bilk someone, you're basically being sneaky and breaking the law. And you could say like the stockbroker bilked his clients out of millions of dollars. See, so it's definitely not just taking money, it's taking it in a way that's totally wrong. Okay, bombastic. I love that word, bombastic. What does it mean to be bombastic?
Exaggerated.
It means somebody that sounds really impressive. Maybe he's got a booming voice and he uses big words and he's very dramatic, but he says nothing. So he's big on performance and very, very small on meaning. So when you're bombastic, that's not a good thing. People just want you to shut up because all you're doing is filling the room with noise. You're impressed with your own voice and you're not contributing anything of value. So we don't want to be bombastic. We want to be eloquent. When we're eloquent, that means we're saying something. Okay. So next time your friends just won't shut up, you could say, hey, stop being bombastic. All right. What does cajole mean when you're cajoling somebody?
It's to persuade by flattery.
Yeah, when you cajole someone, it's not as bad as blandishments. Blandishments implies that you're doing something a little underhanded. You're bribing someone. But cajoling someone, it could be a little more innocent, like you say, come on, let's go to the park. You'll have a good time. You know, you're a great soccer player. Let's go play some soccer. I want to see how well you kick the ball. So yeah, there's a little flattery in there, but cajoling someone is not as dark as blandishment. Okay? It's a little more innocent than blandishments. Good. Excellent. Now, I want you to tell me something. When does transmutation in modern physics and modern chemistry, when does it actually occur? What is the process by which one element can be transformed into another? Can you guys tell me that? How can we turn one element into another element? And give me an example.
Put
This
them,
is,
them in the nuclear reactor.
yes, give me an example of transmutation.
Let me see. MO translate to TC.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about uranium-235. So it's basically unstable, okay? It undergoes radioactive decay, and it turns into two fissile products. What does it turn into? When the nucleus breaks apart, because it's unstable, what does uranium-235 turn into? Well, it turns into barium and krypton. So there you go, it's transmutation. But it's nuclear chemistry. It's not the transmutation that we heard about from the 18th century or 17th century. This is, as William points out, this is nuclear, essentially the nucleus breaking up. Because an element is defined by the number of protons, right? And there are different isotypes sometimes of the same, different isotopes of the same element based on the number of neutrons. But some nuclei are unstable if they have too many neutrons relative to protons. And so when they're unstable, those nuclei can break apart. And when they do, they release energy. And actually, it's kind of interesting. When you take uranium, radioactive uranium, and it breaks apart into thallium and xenon, if you weigh, to barium and krypton, when you weigh the barium and the krypton? Does it weigh the same as the uranium-235? Or does it weigh less or more?
Less.
Yes, that's correct. And where did that mass go?
The energy.
Exactly right. That's Einstein. When you lose a little bit of mass and release so much energy. That's why nuclear fission is so incredibly productive of energy. So you take a uranium nucleus, right? You weigh it. Then you let it radioactively decay. It decays into barium and krypton. Then you weigh the barium and the krypton, and it weighs less than uranium. And that lost mass has been converted into energy. Completely different from the transmutation that we talked about from the 17th century, 60, whatever it was. This is modern nuclear physics, okay? They didn't know anything about that. But I just wanted you to know that transmutation is legitimate when you're talking about nuclear physics. Okay. Now we're going to do etymology. So let's talk about malleable. Where do you think malleable comes from? Do you think it's Latin or Greek, or what do you think it is? Okay. So you got the stapes, the incus, and the malleus in your ear, the three bones in your ear. Why do they call it the malleus? Because it's like a hammer, right? Stapes, the incus, and the malleus. So it's from the same Latin root, which basically is malleare, to hammer. And it's from the Proto Indo-European language. Melee, M-E-L-E, was to crush or grind. So we go back before Latin to Indo-European language. There was a word, M-E-L-E, which meant to crush. Then it kind of evolved into Latin, where it became malleare, to hammer. And the word malleus in Latin means hammer. So just like Jake said, you can hammer a metal into a different shape. That's where we get the idea of malleable. And that's why it originally referred to metals, because you could hammer metals, you could flatten them, you could lengthen them, you could bend them. So there's where we get the word malleable. And other words come from that, believe it or not. Maul, to maul someone, M-A-U-L. Like when a dog gets a big, like, I don't know, pit bull mauls you, grinds you down into, dust, or crushes you, right? That's from the same root. Okay? Malleare, to maul. How about mallet? A mallet is a hammer, like a wooden mallet. Same root. And believe it or not, even the word meal. Okay, meal doesn't just mean dinner or breakfast or lunch. Meal is fine grain, right? And so it's been hammered into a fine grain, essentially. And that's where you get the word meal. So all of those words, very common, maul, mallet, meal, and malleable, all come from the Latin malleus, which means hammer. And originally from Proto-Indo-European, mele, which meant to crush. Okay, so that's kind of an interesting word, malleable. And the next word we're going to do is bombastic, because I just love the sound of it. Now, that's also from Latin, but the Romans stole it from the Greeks. So originally it was Greek, then it became Roman. So bombast, okay, is the root, right? Bombast or bomba. And guess what it means? It means cotton padding used to swell a garment or a blanket. So if you have a big comforter that's really kind of, I don't know, fluffy, what's inside of it is bombast. This is the old English term, which came from the Latin bombasum, which meant cotton, and from the Greek bombyx, which meant silk. So the Greeks used to cultivate silkworms and they used to make silk. And the word that they used to refer to silk was bombyx. The Latin took the word bombyx, transformed it. So it wasn't referring to silk anymore. Now it was referring to cotton. And they made it into this word bombasum, which was cotton. And then we decided, the British, I guess this is English, like 15th century, that bombast was cotton padding, cotton filling for clothing or for blankets. So it became a word, bombast. And somehow, then that word became bombastic. So I guess the connection is that somebody who is like full of it, he's full of crap, he's just he's talking like really loud. He sounds like he's all puffed up, but basically he's just a bunch of fluff. There's no substance there. He's just filler. So you see how words change and evolve. First from silk, then to cotton, and then to cotton stuffing, and then to a guy that just is too loud and doesn't say anything. Okay? I'm bombastic. There you go. Thanks, guys. Great session, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.